The courtroom was packed. Reporters, spectators, and officials filled the benches, waiting for the final nail in the coffin. The air was thick with tension, the kind that made breathing feel like an effort. Olivia Carter stood in the center, wrists bound in cold steel, her gaze fixed on the judge. She didn't flinch. She didn't blink. She was watching, calculating, waiting. Across from her, Detective Vincent Hayes sat back in his chair, arms crossed, a smug grin plastered across his face. To him, this was just another win, another criminal off the streets. Except Olivia wasn't a criminal, and she sure as hell wasn't going down without a fight. "Your Honor," Hayes began, standing up with the confidence of a man who believed he'd already won, "we have presented indisputable evidence. The defendant was found in possession of illicit funds, documents proving bribery, and direct ties to an underground network operating outside the law. It's clear, beyond a reasonable doubt, that Olivia Carter is guilty." A murmur swept through the courtroom. Olivia tilted her head slightly, watching as the jurors exchanged glances. Some nodded, others shifted uncomfortably. Hayes had done his job well, too well. He made sure there was no room for doubt. The judge sighed and adjusted his glasses, peering down at Olivia over the top of them. "Miss Carter, do you have anything to say before I deliver my verdict?" And that was it. That was the moment Olivia had been waiting for. She exhaled slowly, then lifted her chin. "Yes, Your Honor," she said, her voice smooth but firm. "Before you pass judgment, I'd like to present new evidence." Silence. A long, stretched pause that made Hayes's grin falter. The judge frowned. "Miss Carter, this trial has gone on long enough. Your defense has failed to provide any exonerating evidence thus far. What could you possibly—" "I'd like to introduce myself," Olivia interrupted. The room shifted. The judge hesitated. Hayes narrowed his eyes. "I am Olivia Carter. I am not a criminal. I am not a trafficker. I am not a fraud. I am—" She paused for effect, letting her next word slice through the silence like a blade. "A CIA agent." Gasps erupted from the courtroom. Reporters scrambled to scribble notes. Cameras flashed. The jurors, once confident in their decision, now looked completely lost. The judge's eyes widened. "Miss Carter, are you saying—" "I'm saying," Olivia cut in, "that I was framed." All the composure Vincent Hayes had built up began to crack. His jaw tightened, his fingers curled into fists. "This is a desperate move, Your Honor," he said through clenched teeth. "A last-ditch effort to mislead the court." "Sit down, Detective," Olivia said coolly, "and let me show you what real evidence looks like." Hayes didn't move. He couldn't. Because at that moment, the courtroom doors burst open. A woman in a sleek gray suit strode in, her heels clicking against the polished floors. She carried a black case, a briefcase locked tighter than the vaults of the Federal Reserve. Every eye in the room followed her as she approached Olivia. "Agent Carter," she said, her voice sharp, professional, "your request has been approved. Shall we?" The judge blinked. "Who is this?" Olivia smirked. "That would be Director Laura Kensington, my superior. And the contents of that case will prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that this entire trial is built on fabricated evidence." Hayes shot up from his seat. "Your Honor, I object." "Object all you want," Kensington cut in, setting the briefcase on the evidence table. "But this is a federal matter now." She flipped open the case, revealing a stack of classified documents, security footage, and, most damning of all, a recording device. The judge hesitated, then motioned to the bailiff. "Play the recording." A single click echoed through the room. Then voices. Hayes's voice. "She's a problem. If she keeps digging, it won't end well. We need to get her off the board." Another voice. His partner, Detective Matthews. "How?" "We can't just kill a federal agent. We don't have to. We plant the evidence, let the system do the work. Once she's locked away, no one will question it." A long pause. Then Matthews's uneasy sigh. "And if she fights back?" "She won't. She won't get the chance." Silence. A silence so thick it felt like a noose tightening around Hayes's neck. Olivia watched him closely. His fingers twitched. His throat bobbed. The truth was out. The courtroom erupted into chaos. Reporters shouted. The jury whispered furiously amongst themselves, and the judge slammed his gavel. "Order!" he bellowed. "Order in the court!" It took several moments before the noise settled. But when it did, all eyes were on Hayes. His face was pale. His hands shook. This is a setup," he stammered. "This isn't real." Olivia arched a brow. "Really? Because it sounds pretty real to me. Oh, and don't bother trying to run." She tilted her head toward the entrance. Standing there, watching silently, were 2 federal agents. Their badges gleamed under the courtroom lights. Their expressions were blank, unyielding. Hayes knew. He knew. It was over. The judge exhaled heavily, rubbing his temples before turning to the jury. "In light of this new evidence, I am dismissing all charges against Olivia Carter," he said. "And as for Detective Hayes and Detective Matthews," he looked over at the agents who stepped forward, reaching for their handcuffs. "They are to be taken into federal custody immediately." Vincent Hayes barely had time to react before cold steel snapped around his wrists. His own words had buried him. As they dragged him away, Olivia stood tall, breathing in the sharp electric air. She turned to the reporters who waited, hungry for a final statement. She smirked. "Karma's a funny thing, isn't it?" The name Richard Calloway burned into Olivia's mind like a fresh wound. Everything about her setup led back to him. But Calloway wasn't just another dirty cop. He was retired, untouchable, and protected by people who played by their own rules. She had 3 days to take him down. And that meant finding him before he found her. Calloway had been smart, too smart. The man had erased almost every trace of himself from public records after his retirement. No credit card transactions, no cell phone activity, no address listed. But Olivia knew how to track a ghost. She scoured black market security logs, digging into private charter flights, shell companies, and offshore accounts. And then she found it. A withdrawal. Not cash, property. A warehouse lease under a fake name just outside the city. If Calloway was hiding, this was his fortress. And she was about to knock on the front door. The warehouse was silent. Not abandoned. Too perfect for that. The gravel outside had been flattened by recent tire marks. A single security camera blinked from the roof's corner. Someone was inside. Olivia circled the building, finding a side entrance. Locked. But locks meant nothing to her. A flick of her wrist, a tool in the keyhole, and click. The door creaked open. She stepped inside, and immediately she knew something was wrong. The air felt off. Too still. Too clean. Like someone had been here, but left in a hurry. Then she saw it. A table, dead center. A file sitting neatly on top. Her name was on it. Olivia's fingers hovered over the file. Her instincts screamed at her. This was too easy. She scanned the room. No movement, no sounds, no guards. Yet something wasn't right. She flipped the file open. Inside, a single piece of paper with a short, typed message. "You're not the only one hunting." Her stomach twisted. She turned. And that's when the lights went out. Darkness swallowed the room. Olivia dropped low, pressing against the wall. A click echoed in the silence. A gun. She lunged just as the first shot rang out, missing her by inches. She rolled behind a crate, heartbeat hammering. Then, footsteps. More than one. They had been waiting for her. She reached for her own gun, steadied her breath. Then a voice. "Stand down, Agent Carter." A deep, controlled voice. One that didn't sound afraid. Richard Calloway. Olivia didn't move. "Drop the gun," Calloway continued, "or my men will drop you." She didn't doubt that. But she wasn't going to be led like a lamb to slaughter. "You framed me," she said, buying time, scanning the darkness for movement. A chuckle. "No, Agent Carter, I saved you." That made her pause. "What?" "You were going to expose something bigger than you realized," Calloway said. "So I had to stop you, before they did." "They," Olivia pressed. Then Calloway sighed. "We both know corruption doesn't start at the police department. It starts above them." She tightened her grip on the gun. "Then tell me who's pulling the strings." Calloway exhaled slowly. "You're not ready for that truth." A thud behind her. She spun. Too late. A blow struck the back of her head. Pain exploded. Her vision blurred. And then, darkness. Olivia's eyes opened to a dull, throbbing ache. She was on the floor, hands zip-tied behind her back. The warehouse was empty now, except for Calloway. He stood over her, arms crossed. "You don't stop, do you?" he muttered. She smirked despite the pain. "Not my style." Calloway sighed, pacing. "I didn't want to hurt you, but you kept pushing. That's what I do." Calloway shook his head. "This thing you're chasing, it's bigger than you think. If you expose it the wrong way, they'll erase you." "You sound scared." "I'm realistic." Olivia stared at him. "So what's your role in all this?" Calloway met her gaze. "I was like you once. Thought I could fix things. Thought I could expose them." She tilted her head. "And?" "And I learned that the only way to win," Calloway said, "is to play the game from the inside." She let his words sink in. Then she smiled. "You're wrong," she said. "You don't beat them from the inside. You burn the whole system down." Calloway's expression flickered. For the first time, he looked unsure. And Olivia knew. She had just planted a seed. Calloway exhaled. "Listen," he said, rubbing his jaw. "There's a name you need to know." Olivia's heart pounded. Calloway had spent years hiding in the shadows, pulling strings, making deals, covering tracks. If he was willing to give up a name, it meant he believed she could win. "Who?" she pressed. He hesitated. Then he said it. "Senator Harris." Olivia's stomach dropped. A senator. A man who sat at the top. If he was involved, this wasn't just a cover-up. It was a conspiracy. And now she had the key to bringing it all down. Olivia stood, shaking off the pain. Calloway watched her, arms crossed. "So, what's next, Agent Carter?" She smirked. "I take the fight to them." And this time? She wouldn't stop. Not until the whole corrupt empire burned. A senator. Olivia had spent years tracking corruption, dismantling dirty networks and exposing high-level criminals. But a sitting U.S. senator pulling the strings? That was a whole different battlefield. She could feel Calloway watching her, gauging her reaction. He wasn't stupid. Giving her that name was like handing her a loaded gun, and she intended to fire. "Why now?" Olivia asked. "You've been hiding for years. Why throw Harris under the bus?" Calloway smirked. "You think this is charity? That name is the only thing keeping me alive." Olivia narrowed her eyes. "What do you mean?" Calloway exhaled, stepping closer. "They wanted me dead, Carter. The moment I left the force, I was a liability. But I had leverage. I had him. If I disappeared, my evidence would surface." "And now?" Calloway's jaw tightened. "Now, that leverage is slipping. They're tying up loose ends, and I'm next. Giving you that name is my last move." Olivia processed his words. He was right. Harris wouldn't let him walk away. And now that Olivia knew, she was next. "Where do I find him?" she asked. Calloway shook his head. "You don't just find a man like Harris. He controls the board. You have to make him come to you." A challenge. And Olivia never backed down from a challenge. She knew politicians like Harris. They didn't get their hands dirty. They had people like Hayes and Matthews for that. But no one climbed to the top without weaknesses. And Harris had one. A private security detail that moved him like a ghost. except for one man, Eric Dalton. A former Marine turned personal fixer, Dalton was Harris's enforcer, handling everything that couldn't be on record. If there was anyone who knew the senator's dirty secrets, it was him. Olivia needed to get to Dalton before Harris realized she was hunting, but she wasn't the only one looking. She found Dalton's usual spot, a private bar in an upscale neighborhood where high-profile men met behind locked doors. The place reeked of money and arrogance. Olivia slipped inside, dressed sharp but unassuming, blending with the late-night crowd. She spotted Dalton at the back, drink in hand, his gaze scanning the room like a trained predator. He had security. 2 men. Armed. She needed a way in. And then she saw it. A woman approached Dalton, leaning in too close, whispering something in his ear. His expression darkened, but he waved her away. She turned, muttering under her breath as she headed for the exit. An opportunity. Olivia followed her outside. The woman lit a cigarette, pacing angrily. Olivia approached slowly. "Trouble?" The woman eyed her suspiciously. "Who the hell are you?" "Someone who noticed you just got shut down," Olivia said casually. "You were expecting something from him." The woman scoffed. "Yeah, a paycheck. That bastard owes me money. Why?" She took a drag, exhaling sharply. "Because I did what he asked." Olivia's heart pounded. "Which was?" The woman hesitated. Then, "I delivered something for him. Or, more like someone." Her blood went cold. "Who?" The woman shrugged. "I don't ask questions. I just move things. But whoever it was, they were important. And scared as hell." A prisoner. Dalton had moved someone recently. Someone who could be the key to exposing Harris. And Olivia needed to know who. Olivia walked back inside, her plan forming in seconds. She moved toward Dalton's table, bold, unafraid, like she belonged there. His security stiffened. Dalton glanced up. "Do I know you?" "No," Olivia said, taking the seat across from him. "But you're about to wish you did." His jaw twitched. "You've got 5 seconds to tell me why I shouldn't have you thrown out." Olivia leaned in, dropping her voice. "Because I know about the delivery." A flash of recognition. A flicker of fear. Barely there, but enough. "You have no idea what you're talking about," he said coldly. "Don't I?" Olivia smiled. "Someone is missing, and you were the last one to see them. Now you can either tell me who it was, or I can make your name very public." Dalton's nostrils flared. He was calculating the risk, but Olivia already knew the truth. Harris would never protect him, and Dalton knew it too. Finally, he leaned forward. "I don't know her name," he admitted. "She was grabbed off the streets, kept in a black site outside the city. Harris said she was dangerous." Olivia's pulse quickened. A witness, someone who could destroy him. "Where is she now?" Dalton hesitated. "Gone. I don't know where." Lies. She could see it in his eyes. "Try again." Dalton's lips parted. And then the gunshot rang out. The glass behind Dalton shattered. Chaos erupted. His security tackled him to the ground, shielding him as people screamed and ran. Olivia ducked, scanning the room. The shooter was gone. A warning shot. Not meant to kill. Meant to send a message. Harris knew she was coming. She turned back to Dalton. He was pale, shaken. "You're already dead to him," Olivia said. "Tell me where she is, and I'll make sure you live long enough to use a name again." Dalton swallowed hard. Then, finally, he gave her an address, and Olivia knew. This was it, the final piece of the puzzle. And the moment she stepped into that location, either Harris fell, or she did. The address Dalton gave her led to an abandoned industrial site on the outskirts of the city, or at least that's what it was meant to look like. Olivia had seen black sites before, off-the-record locations used to disappear people without leaving a trace. This was one of them, and if the missing woman was still inside, Olivia had one shot to get her out. She parked her stolen sedan a few blocks away and approached on foot. The building was dark, windows shattered, the metal doors rusted and dented, but the moment she stepped closer, she felt it. This place wasn't empty. It was alive. She counted 3 cameras, all well hidden but not invisible. Someone was watching. She needed another way in. The loading dock was her best bet. No movement, no security posted. She scaled a broken ladder, dropping onto a catwalk above the warehouse floor. From here, she could see 2 men patrolling below, both armed. She waited, watched. One of them peeled off toward a door on the far end. A chance. She moved fast, silent, staying low as she reached the shadows behind the last row of crates. A voice crackled over a nearby radio. "Status check. Report." No response. Then, "Dalton's compromised. Lock it down." Her blood went cold. They knew. And if they knew about Dalton, they were going to kill the witness. Olivia's mind worked fast. If they were shutting it down, that meant one thing. An execution was happening soon. She needed to find the woman now. She moved toward the hall, hugging the walls. The air smelled like metal and damp concrete, thick with the weight of too many secrets. Then she heard it. A door slamming shut. Footsteps. 2 voices. "She's done," a man muttered. Orders came down. "She doesn't leave this place breathing." Where? The lower level. That was all she needed. She moved before they did. The stairwell was poorly lit, the walls closing in as she descended underground. Black sites always had lower levels, places where things happened that weren't meant to be seen. The deeper she went, the colder it got. The humming of generators filled the air. She turned a corner and saw the cell. Heavy steel door, small reinforced window. No guards. Bad sign. She rushed forward, peering inside. A woman sat in the corner, wrists bruised, clothes torn, eyes filled with the kind of terror that only came from knowing you were about to die. But when she looked up and saw Olivia, hope flickered, and Olivia knew. This was the missing piece. Olivia didn't have time for subtlety. She fired at the lock, one clean shot, metal bursting apart. The door swung open. "Can you walk?" she asked. The woman nodded, shaky but determined. "Who are you?" "Someone who needs you alive." Olivia grabbed her arm, pulling her up. "Move." The sound of rushing footsteps echoed from above. They were coming. Olivia's gun was up before they turned the corner. She fired first. The first guard dropped. The second barely got his rifle up before she shot again. They fell. But more would come. They had seconds. She grabbed the woman's wrist and ran. They reached the upper floor, moving fast. The woman's breathing was ragged, but she kept up. Then, a spotlight flared to life. Olivia froze. 3 men stood at the warehouse entrance. And in the center, Eric Dalton, alive, but not on her side. Olivia's grip on the gun tightened. Dalton gave her a look that almost seemed regretful. "You should have walked away," he said. She exhaled slowly. "You gave me the address." He nodded. "Because I thought you'd be smart enough not to use it." Her jaw clenched. "You're working for Harris." Dalton sighed. "I work for whoever keeps me breathing." The woman behind Olivia tensed, clutching her side. She was losing blood, and now they were trapped. The warehouse lights flared on, blinding her for a second. Dalton stepped forward, hand on his sidearm. "You don't make it out of here, Carter," he said. Olivia let out a small laugh. "That's funny." Dalton raised an eyebrow. "Why?" "Because neither do you." And then, she dropped the detonator. Bad sign. She rushed forward, peering inside. A woman sat in the corner, wrists bruised, clothes torn, eyes filled with the kind of terror that only came from knowing you were about to die. But when she looked up and saw Olivia, hope flickered, and Olivia knew. This was the missing piece. Olivia didn't have time for subtlety. She fired at the lock, one clean shot, metal bursting apart. The door swung open. "Can you walk?" she asked. The woman nodded, shaky but determined. "Who are you?" "Someone who needs you alive." Olivia grabbed her arm, pulling her up. "Move." The sound of rushing footsteps echoed from above. They were coming. Olivia's gun was up before they turned the corner. She fired first. The first guard dropped. The second barely got his rifle up before she shot again. They fell. But more would come. They had seconds. She grabbed the woman's wrist and ran. They reached the upper floor, moving fast. The woman's breathing was ragged, but she kept up. Then, a spotlight flared to life. Olivia froze. 3 men stood at the warehouse entrance. And in the center, Eric Dalton, alive, but not on her side. Olivia's grip on the gun tightened. Dalton gave her a look that almost seemed regretful. "You should have walked away," he said. She exhaled slowly. "You gave me the address." He nodded. "Because I thought you'd be smart enough not to use it." Her jaw clenched. "You're working for Harris." Dalton sighed. "I work for whoever keeps me breathing." The woman behind Olivia tensed, clutching her side. She was losing blood, and now they were trapped. The warehouse lights flared on, blinding her for a second. Dalton stepped forward, hand on his sidearm. "You don't make it out of here, Carter," he said. Olivia let out a small laugh. "That's funny." Dalton raised an eyebrow. "Why?" "Because neither do you." And then she dropped the detonator. Kensington studied her. Then, after a long beat, she nodded. "Then we do this fast." Olivia's eyes flicked to the woman sitting in the chair across the room, her face pale but alert. "She's the key. Harris wanted her erased for a reason." The woman looked up. Her voice was hoarse when she spoke. "My name is Isabel Torres, and I know why they're after me." The room stilled. Olivia stepped closer. "Tell me." Isabel's fingers trembled slightly as she reached into the pocket of her torn jacket. She pulled out a small flash drive. "Everything's on here." Kensington took it, exchanging a glance with Olivia before plugging it into the secure laptop. A series of encrypted files filled the screen. Olivia's heart pounded as she skimmed through them. Wire transfers, signed orders, a network that ran deeper than just Harris. "These are police contracts," Kensington murmured. "Not just police," Isabel corrected. "Judges, state officials, even military contractors. They've been running a private intelligence network, bypassing federal oversight, the kind of operation that can make or break elections, decide wars." Olivia's blood ran cold. "This isn't just corruption," she said. "This is a shadow government." And Harris wasn't just a part of it. He was controlling it. Kensington straightened. "We need to take this public." Olivia shook her head. "Too soon. Harris has people everywhere. If we push this out without a plan, they'll bury it before it even reaches the right hands." Isabel swallowed hard. "There's more." Both women turned to her. Isabel's grip tightened around the armrest. "Harris isn't working alone. There's someone above him, someone who gave the order to kill me." Olivia exchanged a glance with Kensington. "Who?" Isabel hesitated. "I don't know, but I know where you can find out." She leaned forward, voice dropping. "There's a meeting happening in 2 days. High level, private. Harris will be there. So will his contacts." Olivia's pulse quickened. If they could get inside, they could get every name, every connection. But Kensington looked uneasy. "That's a suicide mission." Olivia smirked. "Only if we get caught." Kensington's team moved fast, securing fake identities, mapping out potential entry points, and hacking into security feeds. The meeting was set to happen at a private estate outside the city, heavily guarded, no electronic surveillance allowed. This wasn't just a business meeting. This was where power moved in the dark. Olivia studied the layout, memorizing exits, weak spots. Isabel had already proven useful, pulling up names and roles of the attendees. One name caught Olivia's attention: David Lorne, a corporate consultant on paper, but in reality, a fixer, a broker for the people who didn't officially exist. Olivia tapped the screen. "He's our way in." Kensington frowned. "How?" "Lorne is cautious," Olivia said, "but he's also predictable. He meets his security detail 1 hour before an event for last-minute briefings." Kensington's expression darkened. "You're thinking about replacing his bodyguard." Olivia smirked. "Wouldn't be the first time." The night of the meeting, Olivia waited in the shadows near Lorne's hotel, dressed in full tactical gear. At exactly 8:47 p.m., a black SUV pulled up. A tall, well-built man stepped out, Lorne's security. Olivia didn't wait. She moved fast, striking before the man could react. A sharp elbow to the throat, a quick maneuver. He was out cold before he even realized what was happening. She dragged his unconscious body behind a dumpster, stripping his badge and earpiece. Within minutes, she was in his uniform, the fit just loose enough to pass. She slipped into the SUV's passenger seat just as Lorne got in. He didn't even look at her. "Drive," he muttered. She did, straight to the lion's den. The estate was surrounded by armed guards, surveillance drones circling overhead. No one questioned Olivia as she escorted Lorne inside. The main hall was dimly lit, filled with men and women in tailored suits and cold eyes. Deals were being whispered. Plans were being set in motion. And at the center of it all? Senator Harris. Olivia kept her expression neutral, her pulse steady. She had one chance to get close. Then Harris spoke. "Welcome," he said, raising his glass. "Let's get started." Olivia slipped her hand inside her jacket. Her hidden recorder was running. And before this night was over, she'd have everything she needed. Or she'd be dead. The black SUV cut through the city streets like a blade, headlights slicing through the night. Inside, Olivia Carter sat in the back seat, gripping the recorder in her hands. The weight of it wasn't physical, but it might as well have been a loaded gun. Kensington drove, her expression sharp. Beside her, Isabel Torres was still weak from blood loss, but her focus was clear. No one spoke for the first few minutes. The air was thick with what had just happened. They had escaped, barely. But now they were on borrowed time. Kensington finally broke the silence. "We need to move fast." Olivia nodded. "We have everything we need. Harris is done." But Kensington didn't look relieved. Instead, she glanced at Olivia in the rearview mirror, her expression unreadable. "Do we?" she asked. Olivia frowned. "We have his entire operation on tape. What more do you want?" Kensington's hands tightened on the wheel. "It's not about proof. It's about who controls the story." And Olivia understood. This wasn't just about bringing down Harris. This was about winning the narrative before he did. They arrived at a secondary safe house, a small, run-down apartment that looked like it hadn't been lived in for years. But inside, it was wired. Secure servers, untraceable comms, and enough backup identities to disappear a small country. Kensington pulled up a laptop and started scanning channels. Olivia watched over her shoulder. "What are you looking for?" Kensington didn't answer immediately. Then she turned the screen. News headlines flashed across it. CIA agent Olivia Carter wanted for treason. Leaked documents tie Carter to foreign espionage. Senator Harris calls for immediate capture of rogue agent. Olivia's stomach dropped. Isabel swore under her breath. "They moved fast," Kensington muttered. "Too fast," Olivia said. Her mind raced. They had this ready. Of course they did. Harris had known this was a possibility. He had been ready to flip the story before they even had a chance to fight back. Now, instead of a whistleblower, she was a fugitive. And the worst part? People would believe it. Olivia paced the room, gripping the edge of the table. We need to go public. Now. Kensington frowned. And how do you plan to do that? Every official channel is compromised. The moment you show your face, they'll lock you down. Olivia's mind worked fast. We go underground. Not mainstream news, independent sources, hackers, rogue journalists, the ones Harris can't control. Kensington hesitated. That's risky. Risky is sitting here doing nothing, Olivia shot back. Kensington exhaled sharply. And if they trace it back to us, then we make sure they're too busy running damage control to come after us. Kensington didn't argue. Instead, she turned to Isabel. You said Harris isn't the top of the chain. Isabel nodded. I don't know who is, but I know where you can find out. Olivia leaned forward. Where? Isabel hesitated. Then she said it. The Pentagon. The room fell silent. Olivia blinked. You want me to walk into the most heavily secured building in the country and find a name? Isabel shook her head. I want you to find a file. A project buried so deep it doesn't officially exist. Kensington sighed, rubbing her temple. Jesus Christ, Carter. You just became the most wanted woman in America, and now you're considering breaking into the Pentagon? Olivia smirked. Might as well make it worth it. Kensington looked at Isabel. Tell me you have more than just a wild theory. Isabel pulled a USB drive from her pocket. I don't just have a theory. I have a location. She plugged it into the laptop, pulling up a blueprint of the Pentagon's classified storage servers. Olivia's pulse quickened. This wasn't guesswork. This was real. Kensington groaned. I can't believe I'm saying this, but how do we do it? Olivia exhaled. We steal an identity. Kensington raised an eyebrow. Who's the target? Olivia smiled. The one person who can walk into that room without raising suspicion. The next 24 hours were a blur of planning. Kensington pulled every clearance log, visitor list, and security schedule she could find. Finally, they had their answer. A Pentagon systems analyst. A woman named Rebecca Vaughn. She had access to the classified servers and was scheduled for a security renewal tomorrow. That's our way in, Olivia said. Kensington frowned. You're going to impersonate her. Olivia's lips curled. Not exactly. That night they found Vaughn's routine. She always stopped at a coffee shop before work. It was the perfect spot. Olivia waited inside, her pulse steady as Vaughn approached the counter. As the barista turned away, Olivia moved fast, slipping a small needle into Vaughn's coffee lid. She didn't even notice. 3 minutes later, as Vaughn walked to her car, her steps slowed. Her vision blurred. And then, she collapsed. Olivia caught her before she hit the pavement, dragging her into the back seat of a waiting car. Kensington drove off. Isabel checked Vaughn's pulse. She'll be out for 6 hours. Good, Olivia muttered, already swapping jackets with Vaughn and pulling on a wig. By the time they reached their next stop, Rebecca Vaughn was unconscious. And Olivia Carter, she had just become her. The next morning, Olivia Carter walked into the Pentagon with Rebecca Vaughn's ID. No hesitation, no doubt, just calculated precision. She passed the first security checkpoint, then the second. Finally, she reached the classified data room. A guard glanced at her ID. You're early. Olivia smiled. Figured I'd get ahead of the schedule. He nodded, stepping aside. The door unlocked with a beep. And then, she was in. The moment the door shut behind her, she moved fast. The file Isabel had mentioned was deep in the system, hidden under multiple layers of encryption. But Olivia wasn't just looking for a file. She was looking for a name. A single name that held the power to destroy everything. The screen flickered, and then it appeared. a project title, a classified directive, and under it, a name Olivia never expected to see. Her own. Her breath caught. Then the alarm blared. They knew she was here. She had seconds to escape. And now? Now she had more questions than answers. But one thing was certain. This wasn't just about Harris anymore. Someone had planned for this moment, and Olivia Carter had just walked into their trap. Olivia's mind raced as the alarm blared through the Pentagon's secured corridors. She had come looking for a name, a single lead to unravel the conspiracy at the highest levels of power. Instead, she found herself. Her own name was listed under a classified directive, a project buried so deep it didn't exist on any public record. But it was real. She was part of it, a pawn in a game she hadn't even known she was playing. And now, they knew she knew. Footsteps pounded against the polished floors. Guards swarmed the entrance. Lockdown procedures activated. Her exit was gone. But Olivia Carter wasn't one to die in a cage. She grabbed the flash drive, yanked out the data, and did the only thing she could. She ran. 9 bullets ripped through the air as she darted through the halls, security closing in from every direction. Every second that passed, she was losing options. And then, a single voice cut through the comm system. "Stand down." The guards froze. A door ahead unlocked. And Olivia understood. Someone was letting her go. Not because they couldn't stop her, but because they wanted her to keep running. Because the longer she ran, the more she played right into their hands. This wasn't over. Not even close. This was only the beginning. And the only way to win? She had to flip the game entirely. Burn the system before it burned her. Olivia clenched her jaw, slipped into the unlocked passageway, and disappeared into the night. She had one last fight left, and this time, she wouldn't be running. If you want more intense, action-packed stories like this one, hit that subscribe button and stay tuned, because the war isn't over yet.